Welcome to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. Thomas Miller along with Robert Glasscock. About around once a year, Uranus goes retrograde, and it's usually an extended retrograde. We're recording this one in the 2024 version, and happened that during this recording session is when Uranus shifted to retrograde. Oh boy. So we just got finished with a Mercury retrograde. A lot of people say that Uranus is kind of the higher octave of that. So I thought we'd talk to Robert about it. And I cast a chart to start us off that is not in the show notes because what I did is I put the exact time that Uranus turned retrograde, and I put it to a city on the East Coast so that we could do Eastern time, and put that up for Robert to look at. And he wanted us to change to the chart that we see in the show notes for this episode at the top that you should click on and download and have in front of you for this conversation, because he changed the game right off the bat. And this chart has, as you will observe, the planet Uranus, now with that red S next to it, means stationed retrograde by 1 minute, that it is now on the first cusp, the ascendant point of 27 degrees, 15 minutes Taurus. So, Robert, first off, why the game change on the chart there?
Great question. You can do this with any planet that you want to study, including in your own birth chart. If you want to look at the influence of Saturn in your birth chart, turn your birth chart so Saturn is on the first cusp. And then read that chart just like you would any ordinary chart, but you're looking at the whole chart through the lens of the planet you choose to place on the first cusp. So here, we're talking about the moment that transiting Uranus changes or goes into retrograde. Now, we're doing it for the East Coast, but in this case, the ascendant doesn't matter. You're turning the chart so Uranus is on the first cusp, and then you're looking at the aspect relationships of it. And this will be for the world, for anybody, for everybody. So you start with thinking about what Uranus rules and signifies. It's a revolutionary planet. It's a planet of changing the status quo, and usually in some unexpected or radical ways. It happens to be trine Pluto, which is terrific. Think about if it were square Pluto. That would be disastrous, but it isn't. So the revolutionary changes in status quo not only apply to each of our lives individually, but also to national and international bodies, governments. So with Uranus rising in Taurus, it's trining Pluto in the 9th house, which suggests that everybody on Earth, including governments, are undergoing a sort of radical transformation in their underlying philosophy on a personal level of how you're governing your life, on an international level, on how nations are governing themselves. And all of these old paradigms are in a process of death and rebirth, with Pluto entering Aquarius. So all of them. Communism is dying and being reborn. Democracy is dying and being reborn. Authoritarianism is dying and being reborn. They're all transitioning. And it's on a collective level, so that each one of us as individuals are becoming more and more aware of how interconnected we are and how important it is to learn to live side by side with people that we totally disagree with in our own lives, but also internationally. Not everybody is a Christian. Not everybody is a Jew. Not everybody is a Muslim. Not everybody is an atheist. But we all have to learn to live side by side and respect each other's differences and divergencies without feeling in competition with them to the point of having to kill the other, because that old paradigm doesn't work either. But underneath that is this idea of competition rather than cooperation. And cooperation is what Uranus and Aquarius are all about. So instead of competing for land and money and power, there's enough land and food available to feed everybody, every one of the 8 billion people on Earth. But it requires a radical restructure. Now, in a personal level, Uranus trining Pluto means all of us, to different degrees, are undergoing a sort of awakening to a new way of thinking and living. Uranus at the station of retrograde is square the moon and Mercury. Those are very personal planets. So in our own lives, we are breaking up with or allowing to pass from our lives people who are destructive, negative, bigoted, prejudiced, ignorant, self-destructive. We're letting those people fall out of our lives. And nature abhors a vacuum. So an incoming flux of new associations and friends and work and jobs and so on will come in to fill that vacuum. But don't be afraid to let go of what is naturally passing. Uranus square Mercury and the moon can indicate emotional conflicts, the heat of passion, separations, divorce. That's on the dramatic level. And believe me, the moon and Mercury in Leo love to dramatize. But Uranus in Taurus is a revolution in value systems, what you value truly as an individual. And in politics even, what do we value? Do we value democracy and the equality of all, no matter what race, religion, creed, sexual orientation, gender? Do we value democracy? I think we do. And that's what this Uranus trine Pluto is all about. But it all starts with our individual lives. It's pretty hard to be in favor of democracy if you yourself are a bigot or are ignorant or frightened about the other, whatever the other is. And we talked about the Renaissance, I guess, in astrology in a previous podcast here. And Uranus trine Pluto in this chart can signify exactly that, that more and more people are finding value in astrology as a self-help, self-understanding tool and a tool for living. And anybody who studies astrology and does enough readings, you're going to wind up reading for people from all different backgrounds and races and so on. It's fascinating, but it inherently encourages the recognition of the universality of all of us and the worth of all of us. So the danger of this configuration with Uranus retrograde is the square to the Mercury moon. So it's in our personal lives. But even through arguments and conflicts and separations and divorces comes freedom. There may be immovable people in your life who refuse to change or grow. Fine, let them go. Don't be afraid of that, in other words. Second of all, that same square with Uranus to Mercury and the moon tends to indicate that there is some creative urge in all of us, or talent, or love of a hobby or avocation in all of us. That square urges us to find a way to externalize and bring into our lives, either through an avocation or a hobby, or through changing careers dramatically, to serve the collective in some way, to help people identify what is valuable in them and how can they externalize that successfully and constructively. Second of all, that same Uranus square Moon Mercury is an aspect of earthquakes. So we'll be hearing about them. Also volcanic eruptions.
Don't tell me about earthquakes.
I've got one not far from me, the New
9 miles from the big fault, and please.
Yeah, I thought I was leaving LA and never have to face an earthquake again. Well, the New Madrid Fault up in Missouri shifted the course of the Mississippi River long before I was born, but it was a huge one. So, and plus we have tornadoes.
Yeah.
So take your
all
pick.
the above, right? Yes.
Then, second of all, when you look at this chart, Jupiter and Mars are roughly still in a conjunction. They're within orb of it in Gemini. And in relation to Uranus, to this revolution that is happening, Jupiter and Uranus are in a second house position to that. And yes, that house rules money, but it also rules self-worth. And Mars and Jupiter are in Gemini especially, are the sign of the entrepreneur. And a lot of people now, and this is certainly globally, but just you as an individual, Mars and Jupiter, that's an enterprising, even self-employed configuration. But it's basically entrepreneurial. It's in Gemini, a double sign. Don't leave your day job until you're ready, but find a secondary source of income, maybe through a hobby or an avocation or something that you're interested in. Even it could be as simple as, oh, I've always wanted to act. Well, find a community theater and join it, because the creative outlets and the people that you'll meet through that will be enriching for your life. Maybe you've always thought about being a writer. I'd like to write something. That's a great aspect for doing that. So again, this theme of Uranus awakening like a new birth, and Jupiter and Mars conjunct in Gemini. Gemini is the sign of the writer, the communicator, the connector, the go-between, the agent, the mediator, and that encompasses a lot. Some people have thought about, gee, I wonder if I'd be a good real estate agent. You bet. This would be the time, because real estate is all about mediating, go-between, putting people and businesses, if it's commercial real estate, putting those clients together with the property that will best enable them to thrive at a price point they can afford. So real estate is really a form of feng shui when you think about it. So it's really a time that does encourage the expression, the putting forth of these latent talents and interests that you have, and they will tend to succeed to some extent. Another aspect with this is Saturn opposite the sun. Now we're looking at this through the lens of Uranus in Taurus. Saturn happens to be in Pisces, opposite the sun in Virgo. So a lot of people, individually as well as around the world, that Saturn opposite the sun is an aspect of migration and moves. Many individuals will be thinking about, because of their work and careers, relocating and changing where they live. Temporarily, it's a very unsettled aspect as people work through this feeling about, maybe I want to live somewhere else or do something else for a living. When will they know? When Saturn goes into Aries of new starts at the beginning of 2026. So you've got that long to ponder and research and do your due diligence about what you want to do and where you want to do it. So that's another aspect that's pointed out in this lens of Uranus in through here. I'm looking forward to this, to tell you the truth. Another aspect highlighted by this Uranus lens is Neptune in Pisces opposite Venus and the South Node. And Venus is in Libra, so it's an opposition that's across the line of sign. And again, that aspect has to do twofold Venus opposite Neptune can indicate highly spiritual soulmates, true soulmates, finding partnerships both in business and in love that are truly meant to be together. On the negative side of it, it can indicate self-deception in love. And for people who are in relationships that are maybe on the way out, maybe they've lived their natural lives too, that Neptune opposite Venus can indicate a natural ending to those kinds of relationships. But really, on the positive side, it's a wonderful aspect for finding a true soulmate, again, through either work and or love and romance. Now, Mars happens to square that Neptune. So a lot of us will be going through a sense of discovering people that we thought we knew, people that we thought we liked, people that we thought we loved. We're seeing a different side to them. We're finding out, oops, maybe not. You may discover that somebody you thought you knew is a racist. And how did you not know this? Or that they're prejudiced in some other way, or that they have drug or alcohol problems you never knew about, or that they're disloyal, or that they're backbiting and gossips and you never knew this. So that square from basically, it's Mars exactly square Neptune, but the Jupiter conjunction with Mars in Gemini fits into this too. It's an aspect of being disillusioned in certain relationships and accepting that it may be time to let those things go. You don't have to be a jerk about it, but you can let negative people go. And again, in turn, nature abhors a vacuum. So new people will come in to fill that vacuum that will be much more to your liking and much more simpatico with you. So it is an aspect of really accelerated spiritual growth. So a lot of people will be getting into astrology and metaphysics and spirituality and philosophy and reading about these things who've never done that before. And they'll be awakening on levels that they never knew before. So it's a wonderful aspect to have. It does involve a sort of natural crisis in terms of realizing you have outgrown certain situations or certain behaviors, and maybe other people in your life haven't. Well, what are you going to do? And the choice is you have to be true to yourself. If you grow up and somebody else doesn't, you're probably going to move on. And that's okay. It comes back to the Uranus lens. It's okay to make big, even radical changes in your life, but it's in Taurus. You don't have to do them impulsively. You can take your time, but they're coming.
Wow, what a great walkthrough. I really appreciate you covered everything, and I see the value of looking at the chart from this lens too. There's one other thing I'd like to throw at you from the side here. This is kind of a curveball, but you know, we know that astrology gives us a point of origination, and whenever there is, even like the chart that we're looking at, this is the point of origination for this Uranus retrograde. Well, there's another point of origination that's going to happen within this retrograde period. On November 19th, 2024, Pluto is going to come back out of its little stick its toe back into Capricorn and re-enter 0 degrees Aquarius for the last time. No more retro dance. It will be in Aquarius from November 19th until 2024, 2044, 2045, somewhere in there. So for the next 20 years. But that point of origination, and I forget the exact time, but on November 19th, at that moment, when Pluto enters Aquarius for this transit, Uranus is going to be retrograde. What impact will that have? Because Uranus rules Aquarius. Even though Pluto will be in forward motion, Uranus, the ruler of the sign, will be in retrograde. How do we see that?
it really finally doubles down on everything that we just said. When Pluto finally enters Aquarius for good until 2044, that entry, that ingress into Aquarius, makes final everything that we just said about the Uranus-Pluto trine. So until then, it's not quite as final or clear. And I mentioned that in terms of, say, changing vocations or moving or relocating and so on, that might not take place for a lot of people until the beginning of 26, when Saturn goes into Aries of new starts. But this whole idea, everything that we discussed just now about the Uranus-Pluto trine, that becomes written in stone, if you will, in November, starting then at that origin point.
I've been so curious about how this Pluto transit through Aquarius will affect astrology itself. I mean, I've just been like, wow, this is going to be, as we've said, you said, this renaissance of astrology. Does this fact that Uranus, the ruler of the sign Aquarius, is going to be in retrograde even make that more significant?
Oh, I think so. And you know, Aquarius doesn't just rule astrology, it rules all technology. AI, artificial intelligence, is the big one. That's revolutionizing everything. And it's artificial. It's Uranian. It's Aquarian. It's the internet. It's technology. But technology encompasses so much, especially in the medical fields. For example, the breakthroughs are unbelievable that are coming in terms of things like dementia and Alzheimer's, cancer, space travel, satellite travel, all being revolutionized. All of this has to do with Aquarian communications. And I think this is the promise of this Uranus-Pluto trine. So with Pluto in Aquarius until 2044, fascinating. I would love to be alive for the whole thing. I don't think I'll make it, but I would love to be here.
Boy, no kidding. It is going to be a wild ride. That's great. Thank you so much, Robert. What a wonderful walkthrough of this upcoming, 20-year transit that's going to change and touch all of our lives. If you'd like to talk to Robert one-on-one, his contact information is in the show notes. If you'd like to drop us a question, go to the top of funastrology.com. There's an orange box up there, and you can leave us an anonymous question, even without an email. How about that? And we would love to answer it on upcoming episodes. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time on the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast with Robert Glasscock.